It's wonderful to have a chat to Jeff Brayley, social researcher at station sponsor McCrindle. They bring data to life, and you do that for leaders in business, in organisations, churches, community groups. Jeff, what is the data that leaders should be looking at as they look into the future?
Leaders should be using multifactorial data. It's all about variety and lots of different data sets. We want to help leaders become really powerful at impacting and shaping a positive future. And so futuristic thinking is what we want to encourage people towards. You also need to be thinking generationally, understanding how society is changing, and also be practical, not just theoretical. Leaders should have a vision for the future and a plan for today.
Now, generations are working side by side so much more. Do you have any data around that?
Absolutely. A whole report, and there's a great infographic on the generations at work right now. 4 generations in Australia, from Gen Zs aged 16 to 30, who are motivated and looking for accessible and approachable leadership, all the way up to baby boomers that are looking for proximity when looking for new work. They want something close to home. And so we've got a great infographic there available for leaders to engage and motivate their teams effectively.
Jeff, I've seen this treasure trove. It really is. You're giving full access for 7 days. So how can people actually get access to this?
You can get the 50 plus infographics, 40 plus reports, courses, all on mccrindle.com. Search McCrindle Plus and you'll find that 7-day free trial. And we hope it empowers a positive future for all of society.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Station sponsor McCrindle, and you can get all that at mccrindle.com.
Towards Understanding with Clayton Bielen values being a positive radio program for everyone. As we present today's episode, please accept this little ears warning. Some of the themes discussed may not be suitable for children.
Former AFL footballer Stephen Lawrence is joining me, and what I'm really looking forward to sharing in this story is, we're going to chat some of the footy ideas, but there's so much more behind Stephen, and I love that, this depth that he can bring out, partly using those experiences and partly just seeing people and wanting to get the best out of people. Really looking forward to sharing this interview with you. If you haven't yet, please rate, review the podcast, share it with friends. Follow it. It's always free. It just helps us get it out to more people. Let's hear from Stephen Lawrence. Stephen, it's so good to have your company with us today.
Pleasure, Clayton.
It's great to have a chat to you, and that play on the make your mark is because you played A for the best football team that there ever is in the Hawthorn Hawks, and won premierships with them a while ago now. When did you actually play AFL?
I started in 87 as a 17-year-old and played till 98, and I just played in the one premiership.
There you go. But of course, like we said, greatest team, so that's the go as well. Let's go back. Footy's such a huge part of what life is here in Melbourne, and I know that it's been a huge part of your life, but also in this strange way has defined your life, and then has also not defined your life in a whole other sense. And I'm really looking forward to exploring that with you. Where did the love of footy first start for you?
Well, actually, my background is more in cricket. My dad played Test cricket for South Africa, and I was born in South Africa. We came to Australia when I was 4, and I played a lot of cricket as well as hockey. They were my 2 passions, and particularly cricket, and played a bit of soccer, this and that. But a friend of mine from Melbourne, who I was living in Brisbane, said, "Why don't you play this game, which was Aussie Rules?" And I'd only seen it on Channel 7 on Saturday afternoon, and I'd been used to sports where there was one team here, one team there, offsides and all that. And this was guys running everywhere, no offside, crazy. I thought it was like spaghetti.
Yeah.
And I thought, this looks like fun. So I started playing, and that was when I was 11.
Yeah. And so clearly, 11's for some quite late to start even picking that up. How soon did you realise, I'm pretty good at this. This might be somewhere I want to head and play at the highest levels?
Yeah, well, fairly quickly I became quite good at it. I played for Queensland in an under-12 national carnival, so already I was playing state footy. Footy in Brisbane was much less than, say, in Melbourne at the time, or, other footy states. But, I came to love it straight away, and became a passion, and actually nearly gave it up. I decided to give it up in year 11 so I could focus on my studies, and I was hounded down by my coach, and in the end that was the year I was recruited, so I was very grateful that I didn't give it up that year.
Yeah. Obviously it's had to involve a move to Melbourne at some point if you're playing for a Melbourne-based team. Was that a hard move to sort of move away from where you're based, or something that you went, no, that's fine, no problem?
Yeah, it was pretty hard. When I was put on a binding contract for 3 years by Hawthorn, who wanted to sign me up before the Bears were to come in. Yeah. Otherwise, I would have been sort of drafted to, well, not drafted, but zoned at that stage. And my parents were separating at the time, so it was a difficult period. And I thought I'll go down for 1 year. The idea was, after I finished school. So I tried it out for the 1 year. It was pretty hard. I was pretty homesick. It was pretty tough. But, and I had Alan Jeans yelling at me and, run, and you got the turning circle of the Queen Mary and stuff like that. And I literally was vomiting and, I was packing it every day before training.
Yeah.
And I thought, they're going to get rid of me this, But I stayed on, and one thing led to the other.
Yeah, exactly right. You were a part of a pretty successful era for the Hawks as well, and was there something about, and we're going to spend most of our time talking about leadership, but also the essence of your faith and how that intertwines with your leadership as well. But was there something different about, as you look back, the leadership lessons you were learning because of the team that was sort of successful at the time, or is that something that, despite of some of the things that might have happened, you've learnt things?
No, I think it was a terrific environment. There were great people. I came out at the end of '86. Hawthorn won '86 premiership, and they played it in a few grand finals in a row, including from '83 all the way through. Played in a lot of grand finals, and so the culture of the team was towards excellence. A lot of sacrifice, real teamwork, a lot of great collaboration, complementarity. But it was interesting looking back actually at some of the. I was recently up in Brisbane, and I was looking at some documents of my contracts and things like that, and there were some letters.
Yeah.
And the chief executive was emphasising the question of character for the club and the importance of character. And I was very touched by that because of, obviously I really love the whole idea of the importance of character in relation to leadership, which is a big part of the book that I've just written. And the more I reflect about the people like Alan Jeans, who was a legendary coach, and others, and great players, and, a lot of big personalities and, colourful guys like Dermy and Dipper and people like that when I started, and Johnny Platten and Tucky, but people who were in many ways profoundly, strong characters and people of character, and that has shaped me a lot.
Yeah. I know that, and we're not going to stay on footy stories forever.
Yeah.
But can you share a story of how you realised you needed to stand forward in leadership or something like that as you went through your footy journey? Because my sense is that maybe this is the start of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, your journey into fully understanding what leadership was. It started in the footy season, or was this something sort of from when you were a kid? I've given my faith and my background, and I wanted always to be a person of integrity and to do what was right and to be true to myself, and that was sometimes difficult. And in the footy culture, there are elements of it which can be challenging in that. And there were some times where I didn't want to step out of line too much, but I also wanted to be true, and so there was conflict and tension. For example, there was one moment we had a footy training camp at Phillip Island, and all the players got in the bus. And all the coaches and officials were in their cars, and as soon as we started chugging out of Glenferrie Oval, the bus driver turned on a pornographic film on the television. At the front. And I'm sitting at the very back of the bus thinking, oh no, part of me, of course, glued there thinking, this is magnetic, and yes.
I'd seen it before, I have to confess, and I thought, but I don't need this. I knew that this wasn't going to be good for my mind, this wasn't going to be good for my thoughts and how I thought about women and all the rest of it. And I thought, this is poison. I can't be looking at this. But I'm thinking, this is a 2-hour bus trip. What am I going to do? So anyway, I got up and just started walking down the length of the bus. I had no idea what I was going to do.
Okay.
I was nervous as all heck and thinking, and there was this accumulative, the players started thinking, Stevie's going to do something. Because there was already a little bit of a reputation. I was still in my early 20s, but and I had no idea what I would do. And as soon as I got to the end, like right towards the front, I realised the guy behind the bus driver to the left was 17.
Yeah, right.
Luke McCabe. And I said to the bus driver, I leant down and I whispered in his ear and I said, you have a minor on board this bus.
Yeah.
What you're doing is illegal.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was. Turn it off. And to my complete shock, he didn't even look around, didn't say a thing. He just literally turned it off. And I thought, what? Because often you think something. Yeah. Anyway, then I had to turn around. I've got 45 guys looking at me. And I thought, here we go, I'm going to cop it.
Yeah.
I walked all the way to the end, sat down on my chair. No one said a thing.
Wow.
Not that day, not that weekend, not that season, not the whole career, which was another 7 seasons. Not till 18 years later at the funeral of Alan Jeans.
Yeah.
And this is where the leadership lesson really sort of came home. I was having coffee with Andy Collins and Darren Pritchard, two great Hawthorn players, and Andy Collins raised it, and he said, "Steve, do you remember the time you turned the porno off on the bus?" I said, "Yes." I was wondering if I was imagining that it happened because no one ever said anything. And he said, "Well, I've got to tell you something about that. As you know, I'm a coach in South Australia, and I'm always speaking to schools and to leaders in business and all the rest of it. And on leadership often, and I speak and I tell that story." I said, "Are you kidding? I've never heard that come back to me, you know."
Yeah.
He said, "No, I reckon I've told thousands of people that story." And he said, "When I tell it," he said, "I always say," this is what he said, "greatest act of leadership I've ever seen."
Wow.
And he said, because you knew nobody would agree with you, but you knew it was the right thing to do, and you still did it. And I thought, wow. And it really was a lesson to me that actually we don't know who our audience is, even when we think we do. And we just got to do what's right. And it has its own power.
Yeah.
And not to be afraid. I mean, sometimes there is opposition, but other times the door's wide open.
Yeah.
So that was a great leadership lesson for me. And there are many others, but that was one.
Yeah. We're going to stay with that in a couple of minutes' time when we come back with Steve Lawrence and talk a bit more about leadership. As we said, his book that he's just written is called Make Your Mark, 5 Hidden Keys to Great Leadership. We might try and get a few of those keys out of him, but also want to talk a little bit more about how each of us are leaders in some way, shape or form, and maybe even how to overcome some of that fear. I think a lot of us hear that story and go, yeah, well, I'd agree, that's right. I'm not quite sure if I had the courage to do that. So how do we get to a stage of overcoming that? And then how also Steve integrates his faith with his leadership as he goes through.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
Leadership is something for you, Steve, that is now your life. There's a sense, I would imagine, that when your job is to go and speak about leadership, it's to talk about it, does it add extra pressure that you've always got to be a leader everywhere? Should we always be leaders wherever we go? Is there ever a time to sort of be okay not to be a leader?
Good question. I think, in the understanding that I'm wanting to speak about leadership, I mean, it's not often, it's not really about primarily having a formal role of being in charge of an organisation or whatever, although that's important, obviously, and, having strategies and all the rest of it. But I'm really wanting to focus on who we are as people, so our character, and that in fact most failures of leadership are failures of character. When we think about it, like, we can give you lots of examples. The Australian cricket team of recent times, there was no shortage of skill, expertise, strategic capacity, technical knowledge, whatever. But it was basically falling into the pressure of cheating, let's be frank, which was in that moment, everyone has their flaws and all the rest of it. So it's not about perfection. We all, have our weaknesses and so forth. But to strive to do what's true, what's right, what's good, and what's authentic. And so if we can really work on that whole question of our character, of the way, recognizing that each moment, in fact, it's mostly incidental moments, like the one on the bus, and how we relate to one another, how we listen to one another, and it's seeking the good of the other. And I think that's, to come back to the question you raised at the beginning, just before the break, how do we do that? And I think it's to actually seek what's going to make the other person the best person that they can be, and also ourselves, but not to be looking at ourselves. And that means really helping them come to life, helping them discover their purpose, helping them to be true to themselves and to overcome those obstacles that sort of block us or whatever. Yeah. So a lot of that is kind of subtle. A lot of that is just in responding to moments,
But I suppose this is the question I always come back to, is that I think that is a good way to overcome sometimes a fear or whatever. Oh, what's the good for that person? And well, that actually can make me push through the little mini embarrassment or whatever else it might be that I perceive. However, that's not necessarily going to come naturally in a moment that pops up unless I'm working on my own character. Is that a fair understanding? And if that's the case, how do I work on my character to improve it?
That's a good point. I think one of the And I think one of the ways in which we can do even those really difficult things, and this is, I think, one recently I was hearing a definition of leadership as having the willingness to undergo shame. I don't mean to be ashamed and sort of putting ourselves down, but I mean not to be afraid of opposition or to have shame. And I think because often we are afraid of that. I mean, we don't want to be thought of in a bad way or whatever. And if we're always protecting ourselves in that sense, then we're going to probably lie or we're going to do something. Whereas if we don't mind, if we think, okay, it doesn't matter if I get opposed or ridiculed or whatever, then we're more likely to be able to let go of those sort of things. So, but in order to do that you don't become a great, let's say, martyr. Like, let's think of someone like Maximilian Kolbe, who in the Auschwitz camp gave himself up in the place of another person who had a family and he didn't. He said, I'll go in his place. I mean, into a starvation bunker with 10 people and, You don't do that in a whim. It's a whole lifetime of other-centered actions, and there's a discipline, and there's the virtues have to be practiced. And, I mean, so it's both. It means working at it day by day. So.
You're a man who has a strong faith in Jesus and in a life of God interacting and working in our lives. Do you? Obviously, as people are listening right now, there's some who maybe say, "Oh, that's sort of my life too, Steve," and others who say, "Well, actually, it's not my life." I think leadership relates to everybody. I don't think it has to come from a faith. My sense is that there is a part of faith that does pour into you in your leadership, but it doesn't have to come from there. My also guess is it probably helps you in that regards. Comment around those comments myself.
Yes. It's true. You do see people who don't have faith, but who seem to have outstanding character. I can think of a good friend of mine at the moment. Someone like Nelson Mandela, for example. He underwent 27 years in prison, and then he still came out and went through sufficiently forgiving the others and unifying the nation after his election as president. That's extraordinary. But I think, having said that, in my experience anyway, I think that the grace the sort of power that seems to come from God does actually permeate through natural abilities. And, grace, I think Augustine said, grace builds on nature, and Aquinas, grace perfects nature. And I think so. There are people who have outstanding natural character, which would become, I think, even more outstanding with grace.
If we were to say, and a little bit unfair to ask you because you're talking to me in a studio, and there's a lot of people who are listening to our conversation at the moment. But if you were to give the number one thing I could work on to improve myself as a leader as I went forward, maybe I want to be a better mum, or maybe I want to be a better dad, or maybe I want to be a better footy coach, or I want to be better in the workplace, middle management, or I'm sort of one of the workers, but I want to show my leadership. What's the one thing that I can go and do, whoever I am right now, to improve?
Okay. One of the things I constantly put to myself, as well as share with others, is a little motto that's, how do I do what I do? How do I win in life? Do what's important now. WIN. So in terms of deciding, especially when deciding between whether I should do more work or spend the time with the kids, in the evening, for example, which is a common challenge or whatever it might be. And one of the ways in which I do that little test is ask myself, okay, if tomorrow I was to be hit by a bus and I look back on that decision I had to make, what would have been the better decision? And that's sort of, I tend to do that, and that often helps clear the fog. And then I've got to obviously do it as best I can.
Does all good leadership and character building require some sort of looking forward to then judge the right moment now and what I should do? Do you think that's actually a requirement, that I have to live beyond just what I'm feeling in the moment, this moment? I have to always be able to see a bit more of the bigger picture?
Part of it's looking back at history, understanding how things have gone. Also looking forward to the moment when we will look back on that moment, which is what I've just said. But I think it's about living in the present moment, and because we only have that present moment. Like sometimes we think, oh, gee, it's such a big challenge I'm facing, whatever, because there's this then and this then. And if we just sort of pare it down and go, well, I've only got this one moment right now, and actually I can deal with that one. So sometimes it's a way of taking a lot of stress off and going, well, what's the right thing to do right now?
That's great. One of the things I know that you talk about a lot is purpose. as part of that. We've touched on character a bit already, but I know one of your key messages you often share, whether you're speaking or wherever you might be, is to talk about purpose. What do you see as what purpose means for an individual? How do I find it?
Good question. Well, I think each person is gifted and created in a way that they have particular strengths, particular passions, driving points like personality, humour, intelligence, whatever. That's actually unique. So it's important for them to actually, and I think it's been put in them because God has created them that way. And so part of the task of discovering who we are as human beings is actually recognising those particular things in us. There's no point in me wanting to be a brain surgeon because I'm just not that not that clever.
I'm never being a handyman, just saying that, right?
And just to say, you can do it, you just got to try harder, it is not helpful.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do people identify? So it's really, for me, for example, in my 40s, and I've just about to turn 50, the last 5 years, really, I've gone on quite a substantial journey of digging in deep and looking at what are the things that I've done when I feel like I'm alive, and so some of that kind of discernment, which we call in Halftime, which is one of where I do some coaching, is like archaeology. It's about looking into, it's about looking into who you are, your history, and recognizing those moments where you think, this is really the real me, and actually seeing the red thread on all those points, and then really focusing a lot more on the things that, when you're doing those things, and how to make sure that you maximize that in your life. So that's one of the ways in which you can make that discernment, and it is a discernment. So it's about really recognizing what's inside of us, not just looking at stuff that's outside of us.
Yeah. How much value is there, or should we put on those closest to us when we're sort of going through a process of trying to dig deep into ourselves? Is that a wise idea, or are they perhaps a bit too close, and it might be better to go a bit broader to get some...
No, I think it's really important that we have the people around us, the people who know and love us, because often they see things we don't. This is, for example, part of the value of a round table, which we have with Halftime. We have a 12-month, once a month meeting, and it's got a beautiful, confidential, but the other people journey together with you, and they actually feed back some of your own reflections. It's like, hold on, 2 months ago you said that, and you've kind of forgotten, or they're refracting light that speaks to you about your own life. And I think it's like any journey, we're not meant to be alone. We're relational beings, and even God, we believe as Christians anyway, is a community, a Trinity, and so we're created in the image of God. That means to be with others, in union with others, one with others, but still with others.
Yeah.
So I think that journey of discovery is never made alone.
Yeah, and I think the underlying basis of what we've talked about so far, and I appreciate the fact, Steve, that I've thrown about a bazillion questions in a million different ways, but trying to paint that picture of each of us in our lives. I think there's a standard, and whether you're listening in your car right now, whether you're listening at home, whether you're walking the dogs and you're listening, that we all have a desire to be better. We all have a desire to actually have a bit more impact in our world, and whatever that means for us. We all have a desire to be a bit better tomorrow than we are today. So part of the journey is hopefully what we've been talking about, understanding that I have a leadership role in this world in some way, shape or form. Character's a really important part of that. Understanding my purpose can then help me drive forward as I go through as well. And I'm sure you'd encourage, and I certainly encourage anyone who's listening to, put some of these things in place. Start asking questions. That's a great way I've found to start understanding a bit more about myself. If you're not quite sure, ask those closest to you. They tend to tell you, right?
They will. It's a dangerous question.
It sure is. Steve, we wish you all the best with the continuing work in your speaking and also this book, Make Your Mark, 5 Hidden Keys to Great Leadership. Thank you for sharing some of those keys and those ideas as we've gone through this evening. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Clayton. Pleasure.
It's wonderful to have a chat to Jeff Brayley, social researcher at station sponsor McCrindle. They bring data to life, and you do that for leaders in business, in organisations, churches, community groups. Jeff, what is the data that leaders should be looking at as they look into the future?
Leaders should be using multifactorial data. It's all about variety and lots of different data sets. We want to help leaders become really powerful at impacting and shaping a positive future. And so futuristic thinking is what we want to encourage people towards. You also need to be thinking generationally, understanding how society is changing, and also be practical, not just theoretical. Leaders should have a vision for the future and a plan for today.
Now, generations are working side by side so much more. Do you have any data around that?
Absolutely. A whole report, and there's a great infographic on the generations at work right now. 4 generations in Australia from Gen Zs aged 16 to 30 who are motivated and looking for accessible and approachable leadership, all the way up to baby boomers that are looking for proximity when looking for new work. They want something close to home. And so we've got a great infographic there available for leaders to engage and motivate their teams effectively.
Jeff, I've seen this treasure trove. It really is. You're giving full access for 7 days. So how can people actually get access to this?
You can get the 50 plus infographics, 40 plus reports, courses, all on mccrindle.com. Search McCrindle Plus and you'll find that 7-day free trial. And we hope it empowers a positive future for all of society.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Station sponsor McCrindle, and you can get all that at mccrindle.com.